All right, so I'm going to start letting folks in.
All right, we got this.
Yay, the day we have been waiting for.
It is.
Okay, then yeah, you should have this.
All right, so we have folks steadily trickling in, so we're going to give it a little bit before we jump in and get started. Thank you all for joining us today on our official kickoff. We have a full agenda, so I hope folks start trickling in so we can get started. Here we go. Let's see. We still have some folks joining. So Jillian, I'm going to make you co-host so you can admit folks.
Great.
Thank you. And then I'll go ahead and kick us off. Do you have co-host power, Jillian? Did it work?
It did, yes.
Yay. Okay, excellent. All right. So you're in charge of the waiting room. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. I don't know what happened to my PowerPoint, but it jumped ahead. So let me start it over. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sarah Potter. I am the Education Program Manager with John Burton Advocates for Youth. And for those of you who maybe are less familiar with our organization, we are a nonprofit based in the Bay Area, and we work on policy advocacy and implementation on behalf of youth and oh my gosh, did I just
sorry, that was totally me. I'm so sorry.
No worries, no worries. I thought I did it. Thank you so much.
So sorry.
This is our inaugural FAFSA/CADAA challenge for students experiencing homelessness. And I wanted to sort of preface this conversation by sharing that this is the first year we're doing this. We're really thinking about it as a pilot because there's so much that we have to figure out. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like. And so I just want folks to kind of come into this space with an open mind and know that we're going to have to kind of roll up our sleeves and figure out how to do this work together. The other thing I wanted to mention too is that many of you are probably familiar with the recently passed legislation that's going to require the FAFSA or CADAA to be completed by LEAs for every high school senior in California. And so our hope this year as part of this pilot is to really refine some best practices that can be used to inform the new FAFSA completion requirement and ensure that our students who are experiencing homelessness don't fall through the cracks because we know they're going to need additional support to overcome the additional barriers that they face. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. We have a jam-packed agenda. And so I'll start with a brief overview of the FAFSA/CADAA challenge. We've been working on some policies and procedures for counties to help figure out how to track their homeless students who are high school seniors and how to verify that they've completed the FAFSA or the CADAA. We have a presentation from Leanne Wheeler today, which I'm incredibly excited about. We also have a couple of our county offices of education who are going to share some of their ideas for this pilot challenge. And then our partners with Schoolhouse Connection are going to talk about the November 15th kickoff and the social media toolkit that we're creating for all of you. And then I'll close with some of our next steps. All right, so if you would not mind to help us take attendance and see who's all joining us today, if you could just take a moment to enter into the chat box your name, your agency or organization, which county you are in, your role with the FAFSA or CADAA challenge for students experiencing homelessness, and then also share what your completion rate goal for the 2021-2022 challenges. I'm very curious to hear if folks have a goal in mind or a number that they'd like to hit, and we can share ideas around those as well. So please enter that information in the chat box, and that'll serve as our attendance record today. All right. So I wanted to just share a little bit of information about why we focus so much on college and financial aid. And so when we look back at the last Great Recession, which was about 2007, 2008, when our housing market crashed, we saw an overall loss of 5.5 million jobs that were for individuals who had a high school diploma or less. As the economy began to recover, the jobs that were created and added to the market required either an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree or higher. So these 5.5 million jobs for individuals with a high school diploma or less evaporated. They did not come back in the economic recovery. And this is really critical because we know that having a post-secondary education can help shield against economic downturns much like this and other periods of unemployment. And we also know that having a post-secondary education increases career satisfaction, increases health outcomes, and not just for the individuals who have the higher education, but for their families and their children as well. So again, this is why we focus so much on higher ed and why this is so critical for our young people that we work with who are experiencing homelessness. The other thing that we know and why we focus so much on FAFSA completion is that high school seniors who complete the FAFSA are 63% more likely to actually enroll in higher education. And a lot of this, I'm sure, has to do with the fact that they then see how much aid they're actually eligible to receive. And college just seems like so much more of a reality once you realize that it's not going to cost as much as maybe you assumed. We also know that students do better the more aid that they receive. And so this is why we focus so much on making sure that when students who could qualify for independent status on the FAFSA complete the FAFSA correctly, because we want to see them not only access aid, but we want them to maximize the amount of aid that they receive. So students who received $1,000 to $2,000 in financial aid, only 17% ended up transferring or graduating. And this was at the community college level here in California. But when that amount of aid increased to $7,500, nearly half transferred or graduated. So financial aid is the single biggest indicator as to whether or not a student successfully matriculates and persists in a higher education program. So again, this is why we focus so much on the FAFSA and why we're so incredibly excited that you are joining us on this pilot project. So I'm going to do a quick overview of the FAFSA and CADAA challenge. And before people pull out their pens and papers and start taking copious amounts of notes, just know that I will be sharing these slides and that we are also working on creating a very detailed policies and procedures manual for you. So these details that I'm sharing will be much more elaborate and clearer in that manual. It's just taking us a little bit longer to get that finished because we're continuing to get information from CDE and CSAC. I first wanted to share too that we decided to do the FAFSA challenge for students experiencing homelessness because we've been doing this for students in foster care for the past 5 years. Many of you who are associated with a COE are already part of the Foster Youth FAFSA challenge, have already been seen the success firsthand and have been amazing partners in this project. But for those of you who are less familiar or maybe are with an LEA or a high school, we saw amazing results with the Foster Youth FAFSA challenge. So when we first started the challenge, we saw a 45% completion rate. And within 3 years, that completion rate jumped to 64%, which actually exceeded the completion rate for non-foster youth high school seniors. So foster youth outperformed high school seniors and completed the FAFSA at a higher rate. Unfortunately, due to COVID last year, we saw our first decline since the challenge started, with a 55% completion rate. This year, we're hoping to get back those gains that we made back in 2019, 2020, and reach a 70% statewide completion rate. So that is the goal for the Foster Youth FAFSA Challenge. And again, this just really points to the fact that when we do this work around FAFSA completion in a concerted way, we can really make a difference and get more FAFSA applications done. So for our inaugural FAFSA Challenge, our homeless education liaisons will serve as the central coordinators, and those could be our liaisons at the County Office of Education level. It could be our liaisons at the high school or district level, and it's going to look a little bit different for every site that's participating. I'll talk a little bit about that next. We learned through the Foster Youth FAFSA Challenge that it's really important that we verify that the FAFSA or CADAA was completed. The first year of the challenge, we relied on verbal reports and verbal confirmation that it was done, whether an adult supporter who was working with the youth said that it was completed, or the youth themselves reported that it was completed. And we found that there were major discrepancies. So a lot of times folks were saying it was completed, but it wasn't either submitted or it wasn't completed correctly. And so we worked very closely with the California Student Aid Commission to get access to web grants, which is their database where you can go in and verify that the FAFSA was completed and completed correctly. And so our COEs have had access to that system to verify completion. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that's going to look like for the Homeless FAFSA Challenge. The other major component of the FAFSA Challenge is the coordination and training of partners. The expectation is not that the homeless education liaisons will necessarily be working with students on a one-on-one basis to complete the FAFSA or the CADAA. In some instances, they may, or they'll use sort of a hybrid approach and different methods to increase their FAFSA completion. But the goal and the hope is that they work with other agencies and organizations that serve homeless students and provide training and technical assistance to them on how to complete the application with students who meet the definition of homeless. So that's really the hope. And then, like I mentioned before, our goal for this pilot year is to develop replicable strategies. So we want to see this replicated throughout the state. And we also want to see what we do this year really help when the statewide mandate comes into place that requires all high school seniors to complete the FAFSA. One thing that I will mention too, this year, like I said at the beginning, is all about figuring it out. Our hope and our aspiration is not that everyone's going to have 100% completion rate. If you do, bravo, congratulations, you'll be presenting on a future webinar. But the real goal is that we start to figure this out. We start to figure out kind of what some best strategies and best practices are, and that we share that information with other partners who want to join us in this work. And with that being said, when we started this pilot, we sat around and we thought, like, we'll recruit, 5 or 6 county offices of education or LEAs to join this challenge and help us kind of do this inaugural year and pilot this, and then next year we'll go big. But you all had other ideas, because 50 county offices of education, LEAs, and individual high schools opted to take the challenge and join us in this pilot. So you have way exceeded our expectations, and I think that this year is going to be an incredible learning experience. So this is the breakdown of who is taking the challenge this year. We have 27 county offices of education. And many of you I know are familiar with the Foster Youth FAFSA Challenge. So some of this is going to ring a bell. Some of it will be a little bit new or a little bit different than the way that we've been running the very well-oiled FAFSA Challenge for foster youth. We have 15 LEAs/districts who are participating, which is incredibly exciting. And then we have a couple individual high schools who are joining the challenge as well. 3 of them, in fact. So lots to learn and share, and I will just mention too that it's going to look a little bit different depending on the type of agency or organization that you represent. So that being said, I wanted to go over some of the FAFSA CADAA Challenge policies and procedures, and these are just the general policies and procedures that apply to everyone who's taking the challenge, whether you are a COE, an LEA, a district, an individual, high school, et cetera. And so in terms of calculating the baseline, which is the overall number of students experiencing homelessness as defined by McKinney-Vento, who are in 12th grade. So the baseline is all 12th graders, and this includes students who are on a non-diploma track. So we include all 12th graders regardless of credit count. That's our baseline number. We also established some rules and parameters that students should be included in the baseline if they were in your county, district, or school for 30 or more cumulative days, not consecutive days. So that's just something important to note, which is also outlined in our policies and procedures document that we'll be disseminating to you. So that's the baseline. It's all 12th graders. Regardless of regardless of credit count, and they should be included in that baseline if they were in your county, district, or school for 30 or more days. We know that there's a lot of movement with these students, and so if they just kind of popped in your school and then left, we don't want that student who was only there for a few days to end up counting against your completion rate, hence that second sort of rule there. When it comes to determining the FAFSA or CADAA completion, we do require verification through web grants, which, as I mentioned, is the system, the database that's run. Sorry about that. We got a fire truck and an ambulance coming by. Okay, so that is the database that is run by the California Student Aid Commission, and it is what we use to definitively verify whether a FAFSA or CADAA was submitted and whether it was completed correctly. There's two options to verify through web grants. One is through the web grants for institutions, which we have a set of instructions on how to utilize. And the second is through what we're calling, it's a brand new secure file transfer folder system, which was specially created for our Foster Youth FAFSA Challenge. And I'm going to talk about what these look like. We have 2 reporting periods. So the first round encompasses the October 1st start date, which is the date that the FAFSA application opens, and it goes through the March 2nd priority deadline. So this is the first round of reports, and those reports will be due to us on March 23rd, 2022. We don't want student level information. We just send out a very quick survey to you all that says, how many students were in your baseline and how many of those students completed the FAFSA, and we use those numbers to calculate a rate. We'll do the same thing in July, and that report will encompass the October 1st period through June 17th. So we're going all the way to the end of the school year. And both of these reports are cumulative. So we want to know like the total number of students experiencing homelessness that are in your baseline and the number overall who completed a FAFSA or a CADAA. So, and then we'll determine the final completion rates and the statewide completion rate based off that final report. So for both of these reporting periods, we have winners. And all of you will have the opportunity to win up to $1,000 in unrestricted funding that could be used to support your FAFSA CADAA completion efforts with students experiencing homelessness. Typically, we put folks into brackets based off of their baseline. So it's a little bit more of an even playing field because the larger counties tend to have a lower completion rate just because of the sheer number of students they have, while the smaller counties tend to have higher completion rates. So we even the playing field a bit by sorting those brackets by size. So everyone has an opportunity to win. Now I'm going to get into some of the policies and procedures that are specific to LEAs. So when it comes to calculating the baseline, we worked with CDE to figure out how we could leverage CalPads to see if there is a report in CalPads that can be, used to just very quickly identify who those high school seniors experiencing homelessness are. And what we've found is that the CalPads 1.18 report lends itself well to that. I have some more sort of detailed instructions on how to pull that report. Or you can generate a list or a roster using your local student information system like Infinite Campus, Power School, etc. And that option might be better because it's likely to be more up to date than what is in CalPads, though it tends to be the same information, but there could be a lapse between when that local student information system relays data back to CalPads. So you're likely to have more up-to-date information in that SIS. Since we do require a cumulative list of high school seniors, and we know there's sort of like entries and exits, like new students could be experiencing homelessness or identified as homeless, it's really important to routinely update these lists and rerun these reports. And so what we've typically seen that works well with our foster youth challenge is when these reports are run on a monthly basis. Some of our larger counties will even run them twice a month to look for changes and to make sure that they're not missing any students who may have entered or exited, quote unquote. We also have a spreadsheet that makes it really easy to track the cumulative list of high school seniors. And so we'll be sharing that with you as well as part of our resources that we're compiling. And then when it comes to verifying FAFSA CADAA completion, like I mentioned, verification through web grants is required. And what we're realizing too, that's a little bit different than our FAFSA challenge with foster youth, is that LEAs in high schools typically have access to web grants. You typically have someone at your district or your school that is a web grants administrator. And so if they have access to web grants for institutions, we have an instruction manual on how to go into that system and verify FAFSA completion. The LEAs can also, and individual high schools can also work with their county office of education to verify in web grants if it was completed. So our county offices of education will either have access to web grants for institutions or the secure file transfer system that I will talk about next. The best method to verify completion is really going to depend on the number of students in your baseline count. If you have a really large number of students, it's probably going to be easier to use the secure file transfer system and work with your COE. If you have a fewer number of students, it'll probably be easier to use web grants for institutions and just go in there and check each student individually. So this is something we'll talk about and we can provide TA on so you can decide what's going to be best for you. Next up, I have the COEs. So in terms of calculating the baseline, I have the unfortunate news today of sharing that that 1.18 report in CalPads does not appear to be something that COEs have access to, though this is something that we are communicating and working with CDE on to see if this is something that we can do in the future. So at this point, we are hoping that our COEs can request the rosters that the LEAs are able to access, whether it be the 1.18 report or a roster from their student information system. And just like on the previous slide, this is a cumulative list. We know there's entries and exits, that there's going to be changes, that our students experiencing homelessness are not necessarily a static population. So it's going to be important that this information is shared on a routine basis. And again, verification through web grants is required. COEs, many of you that I've worked with on the Foster Youth FAFSA Challenge already have access to web grants. I do recommend that if you use web grants for institutions, that you take the leap this year and start utilizing the new secure file transfer system, which I will talk about next. So this is the web grants for institutions. This requires a user account. We have detailed instructions on how you would go in here and request a user account if you don't already have one. And also how you would go in and verify FAFSA completion for your students. So that's available on our website if this is your selected method. The second option, which I will be honest, I favor. I think that this is just a lot easier. It does not require a user account. You don't have to request, you don't have to file a user access request form with CSAC to get permission to use this, because it's connected but external to web grants. And essentially what happens is you work with CSAC, with Pooja specifically, you get a WIN SCP folder. She provides you with a one-time sort of security token. And then you simply upload your list of high school seniors into the system. The system works its magic, sends you an email and says, hey, your report, your data matched report is ready to be downloaded. And then you go in and you download it from the same folder and it does the match for you. And so all you have to do on that form, this is what it looks like, is provide the student's SSID, their first name, last name, and their date of birth. And then when you go to download the report, all those other fields will be populated. And so under, Cal Grant information where it says FAFSA CADAA application, it'll say either yes or none. So if the student didn't complete the application, it'll say none. And then you'll get all this other information as well. So you could even see the date that it was submitted. And this is so much easier, takes a one-time setup, and you can run a list of 300 students much, much more quickly than you could if you were trying to verify those students in web grants for institutions. So we have a lot more information that's going to come down the pike around this. I'm going to do calls with our COE partners, and then I'll do calls with our LEAs and our districts and our high schools to talk about how to do this and what's going to work best for you. So more information, like I said, don't feel like you have to write that down. That being said, I'm going to turn it over to Leanne. Oop, is Leanne still here? There she is. Hi, Leanne. Hello. There you go. Now you're unmuted.
Sorry about that. Carmina was just writing me and saying why her name said Leanne Wheeler too. So I thought there was two Leanne Wheelers. First and foremost, thank you, J-Bay, for being a part or taking this on and working through us and this pilot. I think this is a really exciting piece. I like the fact that it's a pilot, it's not a requirement. And I like the fact that we have both districts, counties, or we have districts, counties, and actual schools. So thank you very much, all of you, for being here and wanting to participate in this. This is really exciting. So I'm not going to pretend to you that I know everything about what Sarah just talked about. I have filled out the FAFSA once because my son is in college for the first year. I did not fill it out correctly. So I needed, some assistance. It was very intimidating to me, who has a college degree. So I can't even imagine what it is like for our homeless families, our homeless kids, our unaccompanied youth. And so I just appreciate you wanting to take on this challenge and being a part of this at this time. Julian, I think you're on slides, or am I, do I have? So I threw together some slides that I felt were really important for you as liaisons, just to give you a little bit of statistics that the United States Department of Education has put out about the FAFSA, or about FAFSA and our unaccompanied homeless youth. So you can see that over the last 3 or 4 years, or 3 years, we have seen a steady increase of those applications going up. And that's a good thing. Looking at 6,000 kids statewide doesn't seem like a lot, but remember, these are unaccompanied homeless youth. So it's not all of our homeless youth that are in college that are with their parents. So this is just that. And I just wanted to give you just kind of an overview of what that looks like. Next slide. I think that a couple of resources, my slides are more about resources. And of course, J-Bay and Schoolhouse Connection are going to be your #1 go-to. They have resources. They've been doing this a heck of a lot longer. And so they have, all different kinds of resources. But why this is important, several years ago, a couple of years ago, Alexa and Shahara Hyatt with the California Youth Project and Alexa with ACLU did a study of California community colleges. And out of that study, they realized that 5 of the greatest needs based on that, one of those first top 5s was the FAFSA. So if you, Julian, if you want to go to the next slide, the 5 different were connecting to housing support, which we all know is a huge issue with our housing for any homeless children. The FAFSA, 42% of those that were surveyed felt that FAFSA was a really an important piece. Counseling and mental health, which we always know, supported services beyond the campus setting, and obviously navigating through CalFresh. But I wanted to highlight that because there is a huge need, and it's a need that we could possibly make a change. You know what I'm saying? We can't do a whole lot about the housing support, but we certainly can help our kids get through that FAFSA and do it correctly and increase that percentage. Next slide, Julian. So you as a local liaison, you are required to ensure that unaccompanied homeless youth are informed of their status as an independent student. So unaccompanied homeless youth, that's a youth that's not in the physical custody of their parent or guardian and meets the definition of homelessness. So it's those homeless youth that are with their parents are not considered an independent student. So I want to make sure you understand the difference there. You are required to help the youth to receive that verification. It could be at the local level, it could be at the district level, it could even be at the county level, as long as you have the necessary paperwork or verification to allow them to have the status of an independent student. And then obviously, you know, it helps to calculate their FAFSA, their financial aid, without using any parental financial support. So just giving you that highlight. The next question, the law also indicates that you as a homeless liaison, next slide, Julian. You know, you can continue to provide that verification of that unaccompanied homeless youth or even at risk. And you can use your funds, your grant funds, to work through this and to educate and process through the FAFSA for these unaccompanied homeless youth and just homeless youth in general. And I think one more slide. Oh, I have a couple more. So of course you are important, as you know. You've been working for me, for some of you have been working for me for many, many years, and you know how important you are to me and to this program. And I shouldn't just say to me, but to the homeless team at CDE. And of course, my dog is going to whine now because I'm on the phone, right? I mean, it's just like a kid. You are an important piece because you can make that determination. These are the 4 different people or that can make that determination. You as the homeless liaison, obviously a shelter program director, a project director with the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act, or obviously the college financial aid administrator. So not only are you important for working with the homeless youth to get their independent status, but you also could be working with these other entities to help to better support and serve our homeless children and youth. And next slide. The last 2 slides are more of just, again, some resources from the National Center for Homeless Education. As you all know, that NCHE is vetted with the United States Department of Education. So all of their resources are aligned to the law. And I just wanted to give you a few of the resources, not that JBAYS or Schoolhouse Connections resources aren't going to help you, but this is in addition to, and I think that with NCHE, you're going to see maybe a little bit more of what's the word? I think you're just going to be able to see more longevity within CHE because they've been dealing with unaccompanied homeless youth and connecting them with college and financial aid. And whereas JBAE, like this is our very first pilot for homeless. And so they might not have the resources specific to homeless. So the last slide is another resource in regards to a discussion tool, guided discussion tools, and then accessing, why is it important accessing higher education for unaccompanied youth? And so I think those are just resources that you can utilize. They're based on best practices. They're based on nationwide research, and it's just an important piece. So I'm just going to end with, again, thank you very much for being a part of this. JBAE and Schoolhouse Connection, thank you for, really caring about our homeless youth. Unfortunately, I think that sometimes homelessness is trying to catch up to foster. There isn't the advocacy group that we see with foster, and we obviously don't have the financial backing like foster does. So I'm really excited that JBAE and Schoolhouse Connection has really taken this and it has run with it, because I think it's something that is needed, maybe not necessarily required, but it's definitely a needed piece. And it's nice to see so many people involved in wanting to be a part of this. So not my best presentation because I'm not a FAFSA guru. So I turn it back over to Julian or Sarah. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, the good news too for you, Leanne, and everyone else on this call is that you don't have to be a FAFSA guru just yet, because we're going to turn you into one. We have our FAFSA completion webinar next week. I dropped the registration link in the chat, and that webinar will go through the FAFSA question by question, and we'll have pointers specific to how to complete the application if you're working with a student who's experiencing homelessness. So we'll go through all of those nuances, and we also have additional resources as well. And that being said, we also love the resources from NCHG. So thank you for sharing those today.
Thanks.
So I'm going to jump over now. We have the opportunity to hear from some of our partners on their plans for the pilot this upcoming year, and what they're hoping to achieve, and what sort of mechanisms they're going to use to reach their completion rate goals. And so first up, we have Contra Costa. So I'm going to turn it over. I think Esperanza, are you kicking us off? Let's see. I hope she's not one of the folks that I saw kind of coming in and out.
Okay.
Or Alejandra. Sarah. Oh, there you are.
Thank you. Yeah, I was saying I was not allowed to unmute myself. So
I think I had pressed something. I'm sorry.
Okay. That's okay. So hi, everyone. My name is Esperanza. I am with the Contra Costa County Office of Education in the Youth Services Department. And this is just some strategies and what we were thinking for this pilot year. So next slide, please. So for the 2021-2022 FAFSA CADAA Challenge, because this is our pilot year, we are planning to reach about 50%. Previous years, we have assisted with completing the FAFSA and CADAA with homeless youth who were already working with our case managers. So this is a bit of a bigger scale. So we're hoping that with the relationships that we already have with the youth in our caseload, we can increase the numbers even more with the youth who are already in our districts. Next slide, please. And so for our baseline, we are planning to work with our district homeless liaisons. We have an ed liaison who can work with pulling the roster for those districts, as well as pulling the student information systems, setting the goals, and then tracking those goals monthly, and making sure we do report back to our district liaisons and other stakeholders assisting with the FAFSA completion, so that we have current and live data for any youth who still need that specific support of completing the FAFSA. Next slide, please. And some strategies that we plan to implement. And so we have some of the strategies we have is just replicating the strategies that we have already used for the foster youth FAFSA and CADAA challenge. So for the foster FAFSA challenge, we actually partnered with the ILSP to provide workshops. And so for this specific pilot year, we plan on partnering with our local shelter to host 4 FAFSA CADAA completion workshops that will be both virtual and in person. A concerted effort. So we are working with our 3 largest districts to pilot site liaisons, and these site liaisons are actually providing case management services to foster and homeless youth. And so we do plan to utilize the site liaisons to meet with the foster youth at their school sites to help complete their FAFSA. We also have 2 AmeriCorps youth interns who will be assisting with the outreach as well as the completions. And data collection and reporting to stakeholders involved in the process. Again, making sure that everybody involved in this process is up to date, and so we know which youth still need these services. Next slide, please. Some challenges that we anticipate, similar to foster youth, is the determination that youth is homeless or at risk of becoming homeless. And with foster youth, we're able to get a word of court letter, and we cannot do that with the homeless youth. So making sure we work closely with the district liaisons to ensure youth have their determination letters. We also have a very strong partnership with our local community colleges. So making sure we have a warm handoff for the foster and homeless coordinators on campus for that extra support. Irs verification or Irs non-filing verification letters. And so with the foster youth, we normally provide them transportation to the IRS office to get their non-filing letters. And so offering these services as well to our homeless youth, and access to technology. So our department actually has a technology lending program. And so for youth who need this technology, we actually do provide computers as well as hotspots. Next slide, please. Oh, and that is it. So those are our goals, and as well as our strategies to overcome any challenges for this upcoming year.
Thank you so much, Esperanza. That was a great overview. And I love just how much thought you've put into this and what challenges you're anticipating and how you're going to overcome those challenges. I think that's going to be really helpful for other folks who are joining us on the pilot. We also have the opportunity today to hear from our partners at Santa Barbara County Office of Ed. So I'm going to turn it over, I think, to Elizabeth and Fatima. Are you both on? Let's make sure you can unmute yourself.
We're here.
Excellent. All right.
I think Elizabeth was going to start.
Great. Let me make sure she's unmuted. Not seeing her.
Oh, I think, you know what? I think she left. I think she had another meeting, but so I'll get started. And I know I have one of my colleagues here too. So if I miss anything, let me know, Luz. Chime in if you are still here at the webinar. So thank you everyone for allowing us a space to talk about our strategies and our challenges with specifically with financial aid for students experiencing homelessness. So actually, this is going to be our second time around doing, helping students, McKinney-Vento students with their financial aid. So last year, we actually started to incorporate them into our financial aid FAFSA Dream Act challenge. So we started a planning committee, a countywide planning committee with different members from the community. We have different financial representatives from the city college. We have liaisons. We have as well as and then us, the county ed office, we're part of that. So that has been really good because what we found out is that there is a lot of different people, a lot of organizations, probably at the school sites helping students with their financial aid. But what we learned was that we were all sort of doing a lot of different things. So we wanted to get in the same page. We wanted all of us to learn and to collaborate. So that's really one of the things that we feel is really important, and a good strategy is building trust and collaboration with our liaisons, our counselors, our school district liaisons as well. So we found that to be super, super important. And let me see. Okay, so let me answer the question. So last year, one of the challenges as well was identifying our students. So we got a list from one of our school district liaisons. So that was really helpful. A list of all seniors that have been identified as McKinney-Vento. And out of that list, it was about 320 identified students. And then out of those, half of those were able to complete their financial aid. So we use web grants, troubleshooting between myself and my colleagues to ensure that students have completed their FAFSA. So we work with liaisons as well to identify the ones that haven't completed the FAFSA or where they're at. So we use that, and that was really really beneficial. And this year, we're pretty much our baseline, our goal is also 50%, for that specific, because we were able to get the list for the same school district. And one of the areas that we're having trouble with or a challenge is getting a list from the other school districts. So one of the ways that we're gonna try to mitigate that is by having trainings. So we're gonna be offering trainings to our school district liaisons regarding confidentiality and sharing of data and sharing of information specifically for the financial aid. Let's see if I've answered most of the questions. And pretty much also Contra Costa County Ed office, we're also going to be working with City College or any other colleges to help students transition into from high school to community college, so that warm handoff as well. So we're doing a lot of different things, but really, like I mentioned, a big strategy was that planning committee has been really helpful. This is going to be our second time doing it, having all those different stakeholders be part of that, so that we're all on the same page and we're not duplicating services. So we found that to be really important. Let's see. I think that's pretty much it for me. I think I answered most of the questions.
I think you did too. And I love that you brought up some of the challenges around data sharing and your
Yeah.
strategies to just talk about confidentiality and the importance of being able to share data. Of course, there's many interpretations of FERPA. But again, this is, I think one of those instances where we can say that there's a real legitimate reason and need why this information is being shared.
Yeah, and I think moving forward, I know the governor is it's about to sign that bill. I don't know if you mentioned it, that it's going to require all high school students here in California to complete a financial aid application. So that's really exciting, because I think that'll be also supporting our work.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I think both Santa Barbara and Contra Costa for coming and sharing their strategies and ideas, and many things that I think folks can replicate for their local efforts. So thank you so much. I'm now going to turn it over to Schoolhouse Connection, to Jillian, to talk about our big, exciting plans for November 15th. We just came up with this, by the way, so we're really proud of ourselves.
We are, yes. So hi, everyone. My name is Jillian Sitar, and I'm the Senior Higher Ed Program Manager at Schoolhouse Connection. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Schoolhouse Connection, we are a national organization based in Washington, D.C., with a mission to overcome homelessness through education. And we do that by doing, webinars and trainings and other practical assistance such as this. We also work on advocacy on a state and federal level. So super excited that we're kind of jumping ahead. We're anticipating that implementation of that California law of requiring FAFSA by doing this pilot program. So we're just really excited to be part of this project. No one else is doing this in the country. So it's really cool that we get to say that we're doing something that no one else has done before. And with that, I just want to say thank you in advance for, being patient with us as we're kind of learning through this whole process. We are still learning as we're kind of going through this, and I'm sure you all are as well. So we definitely encourage you to ask questions. We know we're constantly asking questions, but I'm sure as you're kind of doing this work, they'll come up on the day-to-day. So please keep us updated. All right, next slide. So yes, we are super excited that we're going to have our official kickoff on November 15th, and we are calling it the hashtag Higher Ed Equity Challenge. And so this is really for us to support that access for higher education for California students experiencing homelessness. And prior to the November 15th, we will send you all a social media toolkit that is going to have sample tweets, Facebook, Instagram posts that y'all can utilize to really just kind of highlight and share this awesome work that we're doing. And we're really just going to be, again, raising awareness that these students experience so much obstacles and challenges with filling out the FAFSA. And we know that there are a lot of great best practices. We just heard from two counties right now, just to hear, how can we continuously build support for these students, but also remove barriers. And the month of November is National Youth Homelessness Awareness Month. And so works out really timely with the FAFSA just coming out earlier this month, and that month being the national month. So we're really excited to kind of jump on in the interwebs and just kind of let the world know this is what we're doing. And these are some of the best practices and barriers that these students face while filling out the FAFSA. And also during that time, it is the NACCE conference. So some of you might be attending the NACCE conference either in person or virtually. And so we definitely encourage you all to share the work that you're doing either in person or in the interwebs on our social media toolkit campaign. All right, next slide. And then lastly, I just wanted to say really quickly, we have our youth scholarship program. It is open until Friday. So the deadline is this Friday, but I'm going to put the link as well, or Sarah, if you don't mind adding the link, I think it's on our chat earlier, but this is a really amazing opportunity for incoming first year students. So students who are applying for college for the first time. This is a really great, amazing program. We provide monetary assistance for these students, but we also provide that case management support, because we know that money is just, one of many of the obstacles that these students are facing when they are trying to access and go into college. They really do need that peer support. They need case management support. And so our program is a really great way to kind of help and provide that community for students. So if you have any questions, the link is there. That's where the application is as well. Students just need to have experienced homelessness within the last 6 years. And there's a few other eligibility requirements, but please push this out to your students. The application ends on Friday. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Sarah to share some of our resources.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we, as part of the challenge, and this is available to all of you, since you are taking the challenge and participating in our pilot, we have free promotional materials. We're just now finalizing some student-facing posters that we will provide printed copies of, so you can share those with your districts and your schools. We also will provide support with calculating the baseline and utilizing web grants. We know that there's going to be a learning curve. We know that there's a lot of information that we're still kind of sorting through and figuring out the best method to do this, but we'll provide that one-on-one support, and I will be reaching out and following up with an additional time to meet so we can go over some of those details at a more granular level. We also have a financial aid guide for California homeless youth, and so this is updated. It's actually just going through the process of being updated, but we're also going to provide print copies of this. And so this again is a resource that's youth facing and very youth friendly. So if you would like printed copies of this, we will send out an order form in the coming weeks to get an idea of how many copies you would like, and then we'll get those shipped out to you to share with your students as well. And then we're going to continue to provide technical assistance and peer learning opportunities. We want to make sure that folks are hearing about the other best practices and strategies that are working across the state, so that they can try those in their jurisdictions as well. And then last but not least, we're going to scream from the rooftops how amazing you all have been doing, and how important this work is, and the progress that we've made this year throughout the pilot. And we'll do that by doing, PR as the winners are announced in the spring and in the summer, and also as we give out awards for the completion rates. So lots of resources to help with the challenge. And like I mentioned, I'll also be sharing this webinar, the slides, and those policies and procedures are coming down the pike with more detailed instructions about calculating your baseline and utilizing web grants. This is my contact information on the screen. I hate my current headshot. I need to have new pictures taken. And so now all of my contact information slides have pictures of me as a child. So that's me with my two brothers back in the day. But if you have any questions about anything we talked about today, or you want to just start jumping in and doing some TA, and working through calculating your baseline and verifying completion, reach out, sarah@jba.org. That is my cell phone number on the screen as well. And I'm super responsive. So please don't hesitate to contact me. And that's it for us. I think we have a few minutes. If anybody has questions, feel free to raise your hand. I think we can unmute and answer any questions, or you can put them into the chat and we'll answer them. And I'll also make sure that my email is in the chat for anyone who would like to reach out and connect. But other than that, if there's no questions, thank you all. This is going to be such an exciting year. And I'm so incredibly proud that we get to brag about the fact that we were expecting 5 or 6 folks to want to do this pilot and take the challenge, and we ended up with nearly 50. So thank you all so much for delving right into this with us and rolling up your sleeves and doing the work and just being very dedicated to figuring this out, because it does make such a huge difference for our students. So thank you all. I'll stick around if there's any questions, but feel free to hop off if you've got other meetings or want to get to lunch.
Sarah, I have a quick question. This is Tara Turntine from the Sacramento County Office of Education. So while as a county office, I wouldn't have the capacity to sign up to do it, I'd love to support my liaisons and be able to pass along information to our monthly meetings. Is it possible to have a list or get from you who has signed up so that we can know how many? I have 48 LEAs and charters, so that would be a task for me to figure it out. Is it possible to find out who has signed up?
Who has signed up in Sacramento?
Correct.
Yes, absolutely. Send me an email and I can get you that information.
Thank you so much.
And then Lavina, I see that you have a question as well.
Hi, Sarah. Yes, I have a question. You had mentioned that the accessibility to the 1.18 report for CalPADS is in the works. Do we have an estimated time when we will be able to have access to that, or do you just recommend that we reach out to our current districts?
Yeah,
Okay.
there is not a completion date, I think, in mind for that additional access. I think it's part of a larger conversation around CalPADS and information sharing. So I don't have any sort of additional information other than that. But I would say that in order to kind of kick off with the challenge, that it would probably make sense at this point to request the rosters.
The rosters
for the LEAs.
Okay, and would there be any confidentiality that we're needing to provide, as far as this is just a new pilot way of going about this? So it's all new. That's why I'm questioning. Usually we provide the support to the districts versus we're requesting information from the district. So how do you recommend us to go about that?
So this is actually a really, I think, interesting conversation, because I know that there are counties that have been doing this in the past and have received the rosters without really kind of encountering a lot of issues around confidentiality or needing an MOU. So it has been done, and I am hoping to kind of leverage some of their strategies. And there could be instances where maybe current data sharing agreements need to be reviewed to see if this would be encompassed, or potentially an MOU. So I think it's probably going to look a little bit different. And again, it's going to come back to kind of the culture and the interpretation around FERPA and what people are comfortable with. I wish I had like an easier, more straightforward answer. But I think it's going to really kind of depend on the county and the culture and interpretations. But that being said, we're more than happy to partner with you in those conversations and figure out how to approach it so that doesn't become an additional barrier to what we're trying to accomplish. We are anticipating this. We'll say that much. This is something like we know is going to come up, and it's just going to look different, I think, in every jurisdiction.
Awesome. Thank you. I would appreciate setting some time aside so we can discuss further.
Please send me an email, please.
Will do. Thanks,
we will do that. Yes, and the bravery it takes to just try to get the data is does not go unrecognized. It's so tricky. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, thank you all. We made it. We're right at the noon hour. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, stop recording. And you will hear from me in the next couple days with the recorded version and the materials that we talked about today. And like I said, reach out. Jillian and I are just an email away and very eager to help you. So I appreciate you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jillian. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Leanne.